Hello. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to 19 Washington Square North, or as we fondly call it, 19. 19 Washington Square North is the intellectual center and home of NYU Abu Dhabi here in New York City. My name is Michael Puruganan. I'm a professor of biology here at NYU New York, but I also run a laboratory at NYU Abu Dhabi, and I have the privilege of serving as the academic director of 19 Washington Square North. So over the academic year, 19 hosts numerous public activities, including lectures, conversations, workshops, all that are designed to allow people in the NYU community, as well as the general public, to come and learn and interact with each other. 19 Washington Square North also serves as a meeting place for faculty and students of NYU Abu Dhabi or here in New York City. Many of the programs here at 19 are hosted or organized by the NYU Abu Dhabi Institute that is ably led by its leader here, the Director of Academic and Research Programs, Sharon Bergman, who with her staff are responsible for many of the events here today. So today we're very, very pleased to see all of you at this public lecture on Decoding Hindustani Music, Art and Science by Dr. Kaustuv Kanti of NYU Abu Dhabi and Zayed University. To introduce him, please welcome Professor Andrew Eisenberg, who is Associate Professor of Music at NYU Abu Dhabi, and who this year is one of our 19 Washington Square North Faculty Fellows.
It's really a distinct pleasure to be able to welcome my friend and colleague and collaborator, Kaustuv Kanti Ganguli. Before I read his impressive official bio, I'll just say that, thank you. I'll just say that I've known Kaustuv for a number of years now, and he is one of the most interesting people you'll ever meet, although he's very quiet about it, but incredible musician and incredible researcher and computer scientist. I first got to know him as he was a postdoc in this research group that we have at NYU Abu Dhabi called the Music and Sound Cultures Research Group, where we try in very kind of sometimes adventurous ways to combine computational and humanistic methods in exploring musics of the region, of the Arabian Gulf region and the broader region. And we've had many really interesting conversations since that time and collaborations, like I said. And if you come back here on Thursday for the presentation that Professor Elizabeth Hoffman and I will have, and Kaustuv will be in the room for us as well, we're going to be presenting a work of ethnographic media art, and Kaustuv was one of our collaborators in this, and you'll see and hear some more of him then, so you're all welcome to come back on Thursday. Dr. Kaustuv Kanti Ganguli is an associate professor of artificial intelligence at Zayed University and a visiting scholar at New York University Abu Dhabi, spearheading computational musicology and machine learning research. His innovative work bridges AI and music, focusing on Arabian Gulf and South Indian repertoires. Dr. Ganguli develops AI models that enhance music understanding, preservation, and education by combining engineering approaches with human cognition. Kaustuv's interests include raga characterization, multisensory perception, and cross-modal correspondence that collectively foster a deeper appreciation for diverse musical traditions through the lens of artificial intelligence. Kaustuv is also a performing vocalist of Hindustani music with several national accolades to his credit and a track record of collaborations and concerts worldwide, including here in the United States. With that, let me please welcome Kaustuv Ganguli.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me here, and I'm really excited to share some of my experiences through exploring Indian music by computational and artistic pursuits. So we'll come to the name a little bit later, Decoding Hindustani Music, but it's not really decoding into building blocks. So I'm not here to talk about the music theory per se, but how I, as a practitioner, kind of gone interleaved between the artistry and the scientific or objective understanding of it. I'd like to share and address to this august audience. But before I begin, so I know that this region is quite vibrant with Indian art music performances. So raga music or Indian Hindustani music, how many of you are familiar with the performance repertoire? Okay. And have you heard the term computational musicology before? Okay, Andy is a pioneer of that. So these will be kind of the key terms I'll be talking you through. And thanks for the beautiful AI generated artwork. When I gave out the title and a brief about the talk, this is what AI generated, the art and science of music. And I think it actually makes sense. It shows colors and some musical notations, an instrument, a gesture. So definitely art and science of music. So AI understands music, but to what extent? Or if we are happy with the way AI understands music, so that will be kind of the core questions as a scientist I would introduce. But the main notion also will be to introduce you to Hindustani music, the kind of practice of it, because in our pursuits, the practice itself is the theory. So there is not really a theory which is taught first and then it's interpreted for performance. We rather like learn from performances. It's like a reverse engineering, and I'll address a few of those topics. So to start with, this is how the setup of a Hindustani music concert looks like. And this happens to be a concert I performed last year in October in New Jersey. And I'm very glad to have my co-musician. He's present here. He was on the tabla with me. And you can see there is harmonium on the left to my left, which is the rhythmic accompaniment. And do you know these instruments, the upright, tall instruments, wooden? Tanpura. So that's the drone, and that's kind of the root of all the melodies that we develop. So while I play the music, I'll also play the tanpura. So I couldn't carry my actual acoustic tanpura, so I'll use an app for that. But let's also listen to the sound of Hindustani music, and I'm using one of my concerts. So this is a part of a performance in a rag called Barwa. It's one of the minor scales. But the fun fact is, with my co-musicians, it was the first time I was collaborating. So it was in a different city than where I live. I went to the city to do this album recording, and this was the first time. We didn't knew each other, but we knew the raga that will perform, and we knew the tala will perform, and we started improvising. And if you have noticed, it was one line that was kind of being repeated with certain embellishments and improvisations. So talking about raga, so I would rather ask you if you have any notion of that, and then from some examples, we'll try to formalize it. So raga, what is raga? Have you ever thought of it or heard about a definition of what a raga is? Okay. You have, okay, please.
I don't know, but is it kind of like a chord, like a set of sounds, and there's different ones, and therefore you can kind of connect it within music?
Sure, there's a different kind of building blocks that constitute a raga, but it's not really a chord because we don't really use harmony in Indian music. It's more of a melodic progression. Yes.
One thing that seems really fascinating is the emotion different times a day. So, I guess we wouldn't typically think of like a Beethoven piece if you performed it at noon or 3 in the afternoon or whatnot, but how kind of time and emotion is interesting.
Sure, these are the dimensions. Definitely is very important, but I'm trying to now get into more of a foundational construct of a raga, and then going into more kind of meta features, which are the dynamics, modulation, and the emotion, definitely. But thank you for your inputs. Yes, please.
I don't know, it's a little technical, but it's a traditional sequence of ascending and descending pitches.
Sure, absolutely. So that's a rule base of a raga. So ascending, descending pitch sequences, then there are characteristic phrases, which are also called motifs. We'll come to that. But very interesting, all of this theoretical aspects that we are talking about is not how we are taught about a raga. We learn ragas through mimicking our teacher. It's like repeat after me scenario. So the teacher sings some phrase. It can be very short, it can be longer based on the context. And then it's kind of repeat after me, and they get feedback, but the same repetition may get different feedbacks. So what we are trying to figure out now is in terms of music similarity. So if we have imagined that the teacher is singing a phrase and the student is supposed to repeat the same phrase, but it's not possible to have a same phrase, but it's similar. So can we define this music similarity? So that's the next notion I want to address. Yes.
When you were singing words or were you singing just sounds?
I was also singing words. So there's a lyrics set to a tala, which is a rhythmic framework. So I'm not really emphasizing on the rhythmic aspect today. It'll be more of a melodic aspect, but there was a lyric. So we call it bandish or composition, and the form is called khayal. So khayal means imagination. It's a Persian word. So you have a composition, but then you expand on it, improvise on it. And this piece I sang was almost for, I think, 40 minutes, that same composition. It was elaborating on that. So I'll come to how we learn and how we perform. So coming to music similarity, so here is a small video from my teacher, whom I have learned for about 30 years, and his daughter, who is also now an illustrious performer of Hindustani music. So I'll play a small snippet of the pedagogy. So this is a typical session that we have with our teacher, and we are supposed to learn from this. So there is no score, no sheet of music saying what you ought to sing. So you have a notion of the raga. So in the beginning, it might be a little more hand-holding, but once you know about the raga, you're also encouraged to listen to other artists' work. And then when you are supposed to know that raga, then that hand-holding kind of goes away. And this is a typical scenario. So repeat after me. And sometimes it may be giving some feedback, but sometimes not. It's just the student and teachers kind of understanding the rapport. And this is called Guru Shishya Parampara. So this is the pedagogy that we exercise. And so if we talk about the similarity, there can be different musical dimensions, timbre, the rhythmicity, melody, lyrics, and at relevant time scales. Like it may be the nuance of a single note at a phrase or even total song. So the feedback can be many. So I'm sure there are engineers here. I can talk about more of that, but to me, this is the model I conceive. The pedagogy is more of a generative grammar with reinforcement learning. So generative grammar, because you already have developed a language model in yourself. So that's the raga and the rule base. So you generate, but there is a reinforcement learning because you either get reward or appreciation or get a penalty or you're doing wrong. This is how you should do it. So it's a kind of in-loop learning, which is reinforcement setting with a generative grammar. And with this setting, I think AI is kind of conditioned toward understanding raga music better. So that's what recent development is. Now, the question is, can AI truly understand music and the way humans do? So we don't want just AI to generate new music because it will be new, but how natural it is or how is it helping the pedagogy? So those are the more foundational questions I reckon, and we want to bridge the gap between human and machine listening. So it's not just as a pattern of sound, something more to it, as an expression of culture, emotion, and tradition. So can it really capture that? And even though there are challenges like limited understanding of cultural context, the main focus for learning from examples is on Western music theory, but there are rich musical cultures to learn from and also many cross-cultural insights. So for example, in the Music and Sound Cultures Research Group, we have studied cultural migration through musical analysis. And this also helps us understand even makam, the kind of structure they follow, and raga, there are parallels. So we can learn from each other. So these non-Eurogenetic traditions. And what is the relevance? So before coming into the actual architecture, The relevance is well-indexed collection with rich metadata so that we can do multi-way searching, which is now not available. Like if you're browsing through your own music browser or YouTube, you can't really search for multiple attributes at the same time. Like I want to listen to this artist singing this raga by this tal with this accompanying instrument. It's not possible because it's not tagged that way. But we can do this. But with the new generative LLMs, we can also generate intelligent prompts. So now every one of us kind of more or less chat with the OpenAI softwares. Now, if music is understood in more structured way, then it can also be interactive and we can search. So this is more from the archivic perspective. Then there is community engagement for dissemination of cultural heritage, for pedagogy evaluation. And most interestingly, research on ethnomusicology with cross-cultural similarities, interactions, and patterns through audio analysis, machine learning, and visualizations. So, coming back to the question of music similarity, so the question I ask is how different is different? Because in the video you have seen the teacher is uttering a phrase, the student is repeating. So it's similar, but it's different at the same time. But if it becomes too different, then it doesn't have the identity of the same phrase. It becomes a different phrase. Now, can machine understand that? And I have taken this example. This is from vision. I think it's more intuitive. So all of us will agree that these are images of birds because our perception is more top-down. So we already know the concept and we are trying to match the real world scenario with the concepts we know. But for machines, it's more bottom-up synthesis. So they always start, for example, here, they start with pixels, then start with background, foreground, then do the edge detection, then object identification, and then it knows it's a bird. So it's a very kind of counter perspective, how humans approach and how machines synthesize. Now, with this, if we can find a balance where these two domains interact, I think that will be a good way for us to understand and make machine understands about music. And as I have been talking about more, yes?
Sorry, is that the same for humans when humans are in the process of learning what a bird is?
Yeah.
Is it still the top-down approach?
Yeah, it's learning from examples. Like a baby, if you show them 5 different images of birds, they'll start to do a feature invariance. And then they'll start understanding what is invariant across birds. And if you show them a new picture of a bird, and if it's not too different, they will classify this as birds. So this is more of a top-down cognition. Whereas for machine learning, you let them learn the feature invariance from bottom up. So they start with pixels, they construct the object, and then the label is matched. So we can talk more details about it, but in general, human perception is top-down and machine perception is bottom-up. So I think, so these broad perspectives we cannot avoid while trying to understand music through computational methods. Acoustics or the signal, it's obvious, but we also need to know about the psychoacoustics, how human perception of sound works, like how these sound frequencies are represented in human ear. And then comes the neuropsychology, where the brain makes some sense of the sound. And finally, musicology, or the knowledge for the recognition. Like, for example, if I played the sound to you, any of you could recognize the raga that was being played by the teacher and student? Okay, it was Rag Khamaj. Now, that is the recognition. So if you already have the knowledge, then you recognize. Otherwise, you can do, okay, this is the drone, so this is the key. You can do, okay, this is sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. So you can decode until that part, but you cannot name it unless you already have a preconceived representation of what that raga is in your memory. So there is also an aspect of memory recall happening, which is the recognition. Yes, please.
If you want to entertain a question, backtracking a little bit about the top-down, bottom-up. Actually, I think you're oversimplifying the human part, because when you look at this, you may look at it and see it as a bird, but what's going on is that you're seeing the equivalent of pixels, which is translating that way, the optics into an understanding. So it seems that there's a kind of more similarity there than.
Yeah, it's always analysis by synthesis. So I'm kind of oversimplifying that part. But yeah, given that this is a reflex for you, then it's more of a top-down. And that's what, so I'm not really talking about how we practice, but like long story short, it's like when you learn something, to convert that into a muscle memory is what we do call riyaz. So I'll come to that maybe in the later part. So this is more of a raga conditioning. So if we have to say the cognition part, so if you know about the raga, you have a model of the raga in your brain. So you condition your learnings and to understand that it's like a different colored lens. So you're listening to a melody, but if you already can map into one raga, your conditioning gets different. You'll hear differently. And it's also very true to the microtonalities. And I'll give you some examples towards the end. Like even if the same scale is being sung, but if you're latching on to one of the ragas, your kind of all spectrum gets fixed to that. We call it shruti, or the specific locations of the intonation. And of course, I'm here using, again, very broad level examples. This is a visual paradox. So I hope all of you can see a square, even though there is no actual physical square present here, because there are no four bounding sides that makes a sphere. So these are visual paradoxes. And music also, there are a lot of these silences, which makes sense because human perception interpolates. And many times it happens, it's kind of a anticipation. So if you are getting to a resolution to the tonic, sometimes you just show a hand and people tend to listen. So these are paradoxes. And if you're doing a signal processing work with no signal at all, but human perception says, okay, I can hear it. So these situations can occur. So the AI also have to be mindful about what actually happens in context and not always bank on the actual signal. So I think this is where we as music scientists community can contribute by asking pertinent questions and proposing relevant rationales. So this is the broad kind of base of the talk. And as I have talked about like art and science, so this will be the broad outline, but I might not be getting too much details into these because I will also introduce the Hindustani music through one raga, and maybe after the session, I'll wish you to sing one raga with me. So that's my goal. So in the science and technology part, it's more of the theory of music, which is the language part, where the psychoacoustic rationalizations, machine learning aspects, the feature, these come. In the art and artifacts, it's more of the artistry of music, it's literature. So now I'll stop here for a bit. So when we learn music, at least in Hindustani music, we don't learn performances. So we learn ragas through its phrases, some compositions, and the method how to improvise and how to elaborate on that. But in the practice that we do on stage, which is kind of stitching a story together, it's a narrative. So while we learn language tools, it's like vocabulary, but what we present is more of a literary work. And it takes years for a novice student to understand how to bridge from this vocabulary, which is more language oriented, into creating a literature out of it, which has a storyline, which has collaborations. So this is very interesting, and I think this is the focus of my pursuit as a musician and a scientist these days. And of course, there are higher level attributes like emotion, memory triggers. And the confluence is interesting. So computational musicology is the paradigm which is very vibrant these days. Human-computer interaction. And also, thanks to Andy, I think you have coined this term, sonic digital humanities, and I saw your paper, so I'm reading up this literature. And this is, I think, the future of the musicology in this Confluence form, in where we talk about art and the science together. So thanks to you. Now, coming to some foundational questions. So the first question I asked myself when getting into this topic is how musical is the music scale? So when we talk about music scales, it can be the diatonic scale, but how do you confirm that it's musical? Or why is it called musical? Any ideas? Yeah.
Relationality between the different tones, the actual relations between the distance between the different pitches is what makes it musical for us.
Sure. So musical meaning soothing, you mean?
No, I wasn't even getting there.
Okay. So why is it definitely these are the intervals?
The fact that they have relations among them that we then perceive as some sort of information that becomes meaningful somehow. There's a communicative aspect because there's some sort of relationship between these different.
Sure. Okay. So I think this is a good time to play the drone. Can you all hum? I get two tones. Can you hum one? What is the? There are two tones, of course, but I want you to hum what you predominantly hear. Okay. There's still two tones, but it's very soothing because this is consonant. So this tanpura, there are 4 strings. The first one is tuned to the 5th degree, which is the dominant, and the other ones are on the scale degree. So 2 on the key and 1 on the lower octave of the key. Any idea why this is tuned this way? So what is the notion of the 5th degree? And this is an acoustic instrument. I'm not really going into the temperamental scale, but more from the diatonic.
Perception-wise, is the 5th supposed to be the most similar to the?
Most similar? Okay, why?
Something to the root. Something about the ratios, I don't know.
Exactly. So I think to simplify, the overtones match because these are pure sinusoids and the complex overtones are there. So imagine your tonic or the key frequency is 100 hertz. So the octave will be 200 because it's a double. And the 5th is exactly divided into half. So it's at 150. So the harmonics of the 5th is at 300, 450, 600, 750, and so on. So each harmonic of the 5th overlaps with the odd harmonics of the root. So if you know the spectrum, it's like a comb function. So the key has 100, 200, 300, 400, and the 5th has 150, 300, 450, 600. So at odd harmonics, the combs are higher, and that creates the maximum consonance. And that is why the tanpura tuning to pancham, we call it the pancham or the 5th note, is the most consonant, and that creates the drone effect. If you use a 2nd degree or a 6th degree, it's very difficult to control that because it have so much roughness, you can't possibly even sing with that. So these are rationals, and I'll play something a little odd.
And good night. In the sky, stars are bright.
So this is soothing to our ears. Is this? This is not soothing. But is it noise?
I think technically, if you can identify the pitches, it's not noise.
Right? By definition, noise is a white noise, is a flat spectrum where all frequencies are present in random way. But this is a very pitched sound, and the interval happens to be the tritone, the augmented fourth and the key, which happens to be the most dissonant interval and creates that roughness. And with some kind of intensity modulation, this is created to alert your attention. So it's a very kind of cautiously composed piece of music. So that's debatable whether we call it music or not. But by definition, this is not noise, because they are using this interval to tweak with your attention. So something will please you and something will not. And there has been studies that lullabies across different countries have used this major triad, because that is more soothing, and in the consonants intervals, in the ranks, the sa ga pa comes top rather than other notes. So this is kind of more psychoacoustics, and this music appreciation, I would say, is more biological and innate. So infants do not need to understand the theory of music to react to the lullabies. They sleep. So this is one way of showing appreciation. Whereas these honks are created to alert your attention. So imagine a very soothing car honk. The accident rates would go high. So that's not the purpose. So this is, I think, that's why artists judiciously use the critical band. So this is about how human hears the sounds. The critical band to create tension and enhance resolution. Modeling thus imperfections is thus very crucial. Like, for example, in our repertoire, there are ragas like Marwa, Shri. I have got a very good musician on the house. Thanks for coming. So these ragas, we use the minor second degree to a good extent, which clashes with this tonic. I'll give you some examples later on. But then idea is to create that tension so that when you come back to the tonic, the resolution is very enjoyable. So you have to judiciously use that. So that's not the purpose. And there are some rationalizations of the melodic organizations. So please bear with me. I'm still not revealing what is a raga, but we are getting there. So I think all of you know circle of fifths. So now there is a theory of circle of thoughts. And what is thought? Thought is a kind of compilation of ragas. So it's a post hoc rationalization to group ragas. So in the current repertoire, there are about 200 ragas being performed, more or less, about 100, 120 being popular. And then we group them into 10 baskets, and these are called thoughts. And these are not generative, as opposed to the Mela-Karta system in Carnatic, if you are aware of that. So that comes more from a mathematical generative aspect. So you take all permutations to create 72 such placeholders. But here in Hindustani music, it's more kind of clustering based approach. And then interestingly, there's a theory of circle of thought. So if you take this one, so let me sing this for you. So on the top, I'm taking the root, which is sa, and the fifth is the pa, the sa re ga ma pa. So I take pa next. So sa pa. Now I make that pa as my root. Sa re ga ma pa, pa dha ni sa re. And because this is octave equivalent, we fold that back into the middle octave. So then sa pa re. And if I continue this, it will sound like sa pa re dha ga ni ma re dha ga ni ma sa. So after 12, we come back to the root. And if you take a contiguous segment of 7 notes, which is commonly a raga structure, including the sa and pa, which are the mandatory ones, so the root and the fifth, then it becomes what is called Thaat Kalyan, and which also matches with the mixolydian mode. But I'm not really going into the comparison mode because the rules are not always the same. And interestingly, if you take this same dial the yellow one, and rotate one place to the left. So what essentially happens is this capital M, which is the augmented fourth, gets dropped. Instead, the natural fourth gets in, and it becomes bilaval, which is the natural scale or the major scale. And if you continue to do that, then you can explain 6 out of the 10 thoughts. So this is an interesting theory given by Nazir Ali Jaidasvoy, a musicologist based in the US. He rationalized this, and this was fascinating. And if you want to explore further and are more math enthusiasts, there are some gap functions which can also get you to the rest 4. So there is a strong mathematical rationalization how these groupings have been done. And this also points to the transposition. Like these thoughts can be obtained by transposing one another, which is also very much the case of the other scales. Now we have talked about grouping and we have talked about performance. Now, are you familiar with this kind of a representation, a melodic contour? So given the pitch values in cents, would you like to try just by visualizing? Is it too much of an experiment? Or maybe let me play this and then you try to track. So shall I play it again? So now these glides are very important to the identity of this rag because there can be more than one ragas sharing the scale. But these melodic shapes are very important cues to the listeners also. So it's like a conversation between the artist and the listener that they reinforce these motifs. And I'm not going into the computational aspects of that, but I'd like to maybe play one melody with this visualization for you just to get a reference, and then we'll come to the more interesting stuff where I want you to sing with me. Now, we can talk about the nuances and the embellishments, but how this becomes easier for us to navigate with this representation, we can do this motif spotting and we can easily learn easier. Like for example, in some cases, the rhythmic cycle of a performance is even more than a minute. So if you're looking for a phrase to repeat on the next cycle, you have to wait for a minute, and it's humanly impossible to retain that much information in your memory. So you kind of lose track of the focus, what you try to learn. And these motif spotting algorithms help you do a query search. So if you give a query of this shape and I want variations of this in the whole performance, it kind of filters out to you. And then you can kind of go from one to the other to see the variations and learn the space of differences and the variability. So, yes.
But what is sur? Like, how does that fit into all this?
Sur is the word for melody. So I think you're at the right moment. So now I'm revealing you what we conceive as raga in Hindustani music. So it's a melodic framework. It's neither a scale nor a composition. It's somewhere in the middle. It's a framework for composition and improvisation in which certain things are clearly defined. The choice of notes, and the notes are sometimes called sur, like the sa re ga ma pa dha, these are sur. Their order and hierarchy. So it's very much like the tonal system and the modal framework, where you have a key profile. Certain notes are more important, salient than others. So there is a notion of dominant, subdominant, and the manner of intonation of individual notes and their relative duration. So how you approach a certain note is very clearly defined. And relative duration is important because it's kind of gets accent. So if you are really willing to kind of stress on a note, you can't always put energy because it's a like solo voice. But then you can also show the importance by stretching the note in time. So that also gives you the notion of importance. And certain melodic phrases or characteristic intonations of particular notes are strongly linked to the essence and identity of a given raga, which also acts a cue to the trained listeners. So I think Richard Wides, a very noted musicologist, had a paper on schema, where he says artists are always challenging the melodic expectancy of the listeners. Because sometimes we go to concerts where we have learned the raga, we know the composition they are singing, we have heard the maestro singing maybe for several times, but still they are able to create points of pleasant surprise, breaking the expectancy in a good way. So that is the success of a concert. Like there is no score to follow, but they are breaking the expectancy in very pleasant surprise way. And the artist improvises, so it broadly means to use the stock knowledge of the raga lexicon or grammar in creative ways to form new structures out of these building blocks. Now, let's quickly exercise how we construct a raga. Now, I have taken a kind of so-called difficult scale, but I think you can do it very easily. So this is, we call Purvi Thaat. It's the twilight melody, so it resonates with the time of the day. And I'll sing the tonal material. So the content is sa re ga ma pa dha ni sa sa ni dha pa ma ga re sa. Are you familiar with this scale? No? Okay. Now, this Purvi is a compilation of several ragas. Now, how it will differ is based on the ascent and descent sequences, as well as some phraseology and the relative importances. So, in this rag called Shri, a specific rag, we omit the third and sixth degree in the ascent. So we sing sa re ma pa ni sa sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. But this is still the scale of Rag Shri. So what makes it a little closer to Rag Shri is called these notions of Vadi, Samvadi, and Nyaswara. So Vadi is like the second most important note after the tonic, and Samvadi is often a correlate of that. And Nyaswara, its definition is kind of a pleasant pause where you can really stay longer. So here I have kind of put some asterisks to show which are the most important and relatively less important. So if I have to sing really with the notion of the Vadi Samvadi, I would slow down on the re. For example, sa re ma pa ni sa sa re. And now you see I'm not singing a flat re. Sa re. This is a characteristic intonation of this rag. And if I pick another rag from the same Thaat Purvi, it will have a very different intonation of this note. So that's how we differ. And there is something called chalan or the motifs. Like, for example, what are the different ways you can approach a specific nyaswar? A very typical motif of this rag is par with a very slow glide. Par. But if you want to start from the 6th degree, you can't do the glide. Rather, you have to do the ma ga re. And if you do that, then your intonation is different. So these are the kind of rules that we learn from examples. So there is no description of these rules, rather it's prescribed. And from the example recordings and the tutors' classes, the pedagogy, we learn these rules. And once we know this rag, our perception is kind of conditioned. So even if there are slight variations, we know how to kind of take it back to the framework. So this is broadly the melodic organization. And for the computational analysis, so we basically do corpus-based analysis. So we take several recordings of the same rag, possibly by different artists, to capture the variability, and then try to do proof of concept to begin with. So the concepts that we learn here, can we find that evidence in the recordings? And there are different ways. So this is how we are kind of converting the melodic contour into more symbolic transcription without losing the essence of it. So then the psychological correlates really help. So which are the most essential elements that you cannot get rid of or simplify, oversimplify, and which are the things you can encode. So this is what kind of encodes Hindustani music, and that's what we are trying to decode. But raga melody is beyond sequence of notes. For example, if this is the representation that from the original contour, the blue one, the symbolic representation gets, but musicians do a lot of interpolation, as I said before. So as Richard says, there is simultaneously an awareness of contour and nuance within and between categories, which are the intertonal pitch space and intermatra rhythmic space. So I would like to show you, before I end, a kind of scientific approach that we take to do some of the showcase of the technology to understand music. So our ultimate aim, as I told before, is to closely understand music as humans do, but trying to do small building blocks and trying the machine to understand. So this is a framework we developed about 10 years back as an ethical hacking solution. So it's called RagaWise. So I will sing to the system. It will extract the pitch in real time. This will be shown in this pane. And this will then extract the transcription of the steady notes, which is the melody here. And based on some heuristic rules, it will show the likelihood of which is the most likely raga. But it is not a one-way classifier. The insight that we generate is it also shows you what are the other likely ragas from that phrase, which is very unlikely in our pedagogy. So that's a contribution we want to get back through this analysis. Re, ga, da, pa, ga, pa, da, sha. So here we can see whatever I was singing, it managed to transcribe them to the very correct form. And I was singing Rag Bhupali, so it also showed the Bhupali. So these are the tools we build to kind of have a checkpoint whether the machine is understanding what we are trying them to understand. Because sometimes AI can act as a black box and it can just show you the output, but then we are not really learning what learning representation it's learning. So then it's not a human-computer interaction. It's a total black box system taking over. And as a cognitively based or humanistic AI expert, we don't want to let that happen. So we always do checkpoints to ensure these things. So where is this leading to? The quest still remains defining improvisation. So we have barely scratched the surface of what is the melodic organization of a raga. Then the improvisation is another aspect that takes years for the learners to kind of master. And this definitely includes long-term memory. So the question is, what is the form that a raga is stored in musicians' long-term memory? Because we learn and relearn a raga for maybe over 20 years. So there is already a representation which kind of gets layered, but can we have an access to how it actually stores the information? Or what are the factors that a musician adheres to while choosing certain embellishment onto a canonical form of a melodic movement? Because now some of the forms I have shown you, these are extracted from concerts, but there is no notion of this is the canonical form that every school of thought agrees. But can we kind of extract that from the performance repertoire, which will be helping maybe the uninitiated appreciation to get more closer to the representation of the music? Or what is the crux or nucleus of a raga characteristic pattern that carries the relevant information? Because in information sciences, we always talk about entropy, mutual information. Now, in this, can we also pinpoint which is the more information carrying element to model a better similarity model? So these are the questions, and there are pointers in the musicological texts. For example, Vides talks about focal note, Van der Meer has talked about toneme. So toneme, he talks about it's a parallel to phoneme. It's like the basic block of speech and basic block of this phraseology. Now, can we get to that? And there are Gestalt principles in psychology. So I wish to incorporate those things into the AI model to have a more well-rounded understanding and not going all by the kind of more discrete terms. So now I think I will wrap up there. I'm not going too much into this. Concluding with the notion that perspective does matter. Like paradoxes in vision and audition, there is some merit in rethinking music AI in terms of humanistic experiential modeling. So when there is new ideas, it's better to rethink rather than reject. And multidisciplinary collaborative approach, of course, wins. And there has to be a dialogue between musicians and theorists. We had a hard time talking as scientists to musicians, but because I wear both hats, I was kind of the mediator. And we could manage to some extent, but I think there has to be a common language between the practitioners and the scientists to have a better exchange in this paradigm. And I advocate for building AI more as an empirical framework and not for inferential models. And cross-cultural collaboration always helps overcome language barrier. And I think I'll end there. Thanks to the funding and NYUAD Institute for graciously hosting me. Thanks, Dr. Andrew, for having me. And that's it. Thank you. Da